So, as you mentioned, Tam, we've got pretty tight rules around tech. And we know, for example, that the average age of exposure to online pornography is about 11 years old now. And I just want to know what my children are being exposed to. I want to have that control. And I think the moment we kind of open up a sleepover, we don't know. It's hours and hours and hours of not having access to your child, not knowing what the supervision looks like. Even if we've asked those important questions that we're going to talk about soon, it's too long for me to be comfortable with at this point. And then the third one is that attachment piece is I think children have to be ready to spend that amount of time away from family. And I think that we can have a lot of the joy and a lot of those childhood experiences without necessarily pushing them into a full sleepover. And that's something that we've done at home now, is that we let the girls stay all the way up until bedtime. They actually, with one of the little friends, Maya took her pajamas and her toothbrush. She got into her pajamas there. She brushed her teeth. And then I picked her up right at bedtime and brought her home. And it was so much fun. They had so much fun without all of the pressure of having to sleep over.
Absolutely. And one of the things we did a podcast and a summit interview, it was about a month and a half ago, maybe it was longer, this regardless. One of the things I learned, and I knew that this was an issue being a trauma therapist, because a lot of the sexual trauma that I have worked with over the years has been peer to peer, which means it's not adults abusing kids, it's peers, like their friends enacting sexual things with one another. And it used to be like in 1992, I believe it was only 40% of the sexual abuse was peer to peer. The 60% was adult to adult, or so adult to child. And in 2022, that stat rose to 70%. So if children are sexually abused, it's more likely to be from a child who's a minor than an adult. So when we think of a sleepover, this, and I have worked with kids who have gone to sleepovers and this is what has happened, that makes me really nervous as a parent, knowing that statistic. Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't know what the number was until we did that interview. And then I was like, okay, this makes sense. This is what we're seeing in the clinic as well. When it comes to kids coming in for treatment, and when I supervise clinicians at the sexual assault center, this is what they're seeing. It's often other kids doing this, whether it's daycares or sleepovers or things like that. Even at recess time at school, we have seen things like this happen. So I think parents need to be very, very aware. And before we even consider a child having a sleepover, we have to talk about tricky people. We have to talk about boundaries. We have to talk about body safety. Like, there are so many things that have to happen as a preemptive strike, that kids feel comfortable and they understand these sorts of things. You've had to talk about pornography, online safety, like all of these things if you're going to launch your kid into this world.
And Tammy, I think that those conversations often, we actually got on social media, what is the right age to start sleepovers, right? Parents ask that. And I think, unfortunately, the blurry answer is it's going to be different for every child. And I think part of the reason is that we have to be able to have these conversations with our kids and have that dialogue where we can see that they're understanding, they're thinking, they're asking questions. And obviously our very little ones are not going to be ready for those bigger conversations. But I think once we can start to have those bigger conversations and see that our kids are actually integrating those conversations, not just like some lecture, we're coming in, chatting to them, having these big conversations. Once they integrate it, I think that that's then a sign that they're ready for sleepovers, because they know, I know where I am. I know what my boundaries are. I know when to call mom. I know what isn't right. Whereas I think when they're very little, it's obviously much, much harder for them to actually integrate those conversations and understand them.
Okay. So I think, I mean, for me, this is just personal. I was most comfortable when I had some control over the sleepovers. This was just me. It was going to be at my house. And that's how it was for the last 2 years, with a very select couple kids where I knew the parents. I have spent time with the parents. I know their values. I know their rules around screens. And even though they're in my home, I like to know what kind of child this is. I've spent time with them. I can see how they interact with my other kids. Like, so to put myself in the driver's seat so I could ensure safety, it started with the kids, coming to my house. And when I am hosting for my 11-year-old, which isn't often, but it does happen, I have this really concrete rule, which happens when any child comes to play at my house, is if they have a device, whether it's a phone or if it's an iPad, we actually lock them up from the time they come to our house till the time they leave. And then if they want to, I have their parents' phone number. If they want to call their parent, they can. Like, they just have to come tell me and I'll check in with them. But locking up devices was really, really important to me because I just don't know what they have access to. I also do not allow kids to sleep in bedrooms or play in bedrooms with the door closed. So even if it's like a play date, they are not to be in small rooms with the door closed. That is like a hard no for me. Now, my 17-year-old's a little different if she has friends over. She's almost 18. Like she can have friends over with the door closed.
Yeah.
Maybe not her boyfriend. However, friends I don't worry about as much. So that is a big one. So they can play in the backyard, they can play in the living room, they can play in the basement, but there is no going into rooms with doors closed. And if they're going to spend the night, we always do a check-in to make sure, do you want to call mom? How are you feeling? Do you need anything? And I would pull that child away separately, not in front of other kids, whether it's a group or even with my daughter, for example. There's a check-in to make sure that they're feeling okay. And it's okay. I let them know it's okay if they want to go home. Just have to let me know. Mom and dad won't be upset. We've already talked about it.
I love all of those. So those are all things that obviously, like you said, you can control in your own home. As you start to consider at around 11 or 12 to have your kid maybe sleep at a select few other people, how are you navigating those conversations?
Very awkwardly. I have had the most awkward conversations with parents over the last 2 months, especially after we did that one podcast interview. I think I've said no to a lot of parents actually because I don't know them and they've asked, can my kiddo even come over for a play date? And I simply don't know these parents. I'm like, no, but she can come here. And then I have to explain why. Simply, I need to spend time with those families. I want to know what kind of rules they have in their house. I've talked, had them over for coffee or a glass of wine, and I'll ask them about, screen time use. I'll ask them about like, where do the kids, if you were to have a sleepover, where are the kids sleeping? What's your rules around, bedtime? Like where are devices stored if they're even stored somewhere. I'm trying to think what else we've done with those other families. I've asked how old the siblings are. So if there's a teenager in the home, how old are they? Because I'm a little more concerned about adolescents than I'm going to be worried about young ones. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but if we're looking at the risk of any sexual abuse, it's more likely to happen with a child who's a little bit older. So that's something I'm considering. I think if I'm missing anything here, but questions I'm asking parents, yeah, definitely the sleeping, the bedrooms, the tech, alcohol. Guns is another one. I live in a rural area, so I actually want to know if they have guns in the home and where those guns are, if they have them. Are they locked up? So that's one definitely to consider for kids.
Yeah. And so, Tim, what I love about that is that it's very mindful of those steps into sleepovers in other people's homes without actually just saying, okay, you're 11 or you're 12, let me have a quick phone call with the mom. It's saying that we're going to take this really slowly, because I think part of that too is that you start to have a village of people who are helping raise your child together. So a few close friends does make sense, where we go, okay, this is a family who I know, that I trust, they have similar values to us. I can have these awkward conversations, and then they feel free to have those awkward conversations with me. But I'm kind of giving my child some wings, but just very slowly and very cautiously.
Yeah. And I think a couple moms in particular and I have had these conversations and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that. Like we've had kids over and I never thought to do that. And we've brainstormed other ideas of what we could do if our kids are going to participate in this. So that's really something that has kind of come out of this. It's been really good, I think, if any parents are following this and they want to do this, is the more we start talking about it and we mention things like sexual abuse, access to pornography, things like that. Some parents just simply haven't thought of it. They're not bad parents. It's just off their radar because it's not something that we had to worry about maybe when we were young. And Tan and I are just immersed in this world. So I think it's really good that I hope you can take this and pass on these conversations to families that might be considering this.
Yeah,